Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Consciousness Road Trip podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Watt, and again we're joined by a special guest while we take a deep dive into the tools of access consciousness while we explore this amazing planet that we live on. So hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Consciousness Road Trip podcast. Still at home, still not on the road, it's still not a road trip, but I'm very excited because today I'm joined by one of my amazing friends who I must say has the best looking jewels out of anyone I know, Mr. Christopher Hughes.
Hey, that's me.
That's you, my friend. You're
We
here.
can have a road trip without going anywhere. We can visit each other virtually. It's like we're virtually together.
It's our lives now, right? Like every meeting, every interaction in my life at the moment is pretty much like this, on a screen and virtual.
Well, I mean, the good news is we've been doing it for a while. I'm part of an antique organization, and they've been trying to have meetings online for the first time, and they're struggling. They don't even have many time zones to work out, and they just can't seem to get it together. So at least that's not a learning curve we have to address as well.
I think most of the world is going through that learning curve, though. It's funny because we've done this for years. We've been on Zoom, we've mastered everything. We know how to work across time zones, we know how to do all of that. And you speak to the rest of the world and they're like, trying to just put a Zoom meeting together is basically impossible. So there you go. Apparently we were creating for the future long before we even realized it.
It's true.
Yeah. So I wanted to have you, like, it's not very often I have a podcast and know kind of where I want to go straight away. But this one is definitely one. And obviously we'll go wherever we go. But what I wanted to start with was you were on the Joy of Business Facilitator training, I think it was last week, as one of the guests to talk about business and stuff like that. But actually what came up was you were talking about a conversation you'd had with Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness. And I hope you can remember the wording around it and could revisit that again, where you were talking to him about inviting people to your world, to your reality. Do you remember that conversation with him?
Totally. And I've reflected on it a lot recently in particular, because of where we are in the world right now with this pandemic and coronavirus and being pretty isolated from one another at the moment. It's been very present in my world. But just to recap the story that you're talking about, essentially, I found Access Consciousness because growing up, I always felt so separate from everybody and everything. Like I remember reading the autobiography of Andy Warhol when I was young, and I always thought he was quite interesting as an artist. And he talked about having been everywhere and seen everything, but he was never a part of anything. Like he was always this moon in orbit of the planet, but never really there. And I was like, yeah, I totally get that. I have this like super intense experience of everyone else and all of their judgments, their thoughts, the things going through their heads, whatever. But I always still felt this distance between me and everything else. And so I went, right, what could I ask for? What question could I pose to the universe to actually change this and have a different possibility? And so I asked Gary in a class. It was a 7-day class that we had in New Zealand. And I said, hey, I really want to change this. I would like to invite everyone to be a part of my world.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, that's nice. But actually, that's not your issue. Everyone is a part of your world. You let everyone in, no problem. You receive them. You receive their thoughts, their feelings, their issues, the energy that they be. You're willing to have that in your world. What you're not willing to do and be is have you and your being and your energy a part of everyone else's world.
Mm.
He said, would you be willing, instead of asking for everyone to be a part of your world, to actually step outside of yourself and put you in their world? He said, you are the gift you're not willing to share with everyone. Now, that's a different perspective.
And I think probably, like, for me, because even when I heard you say it, I was like, and I've been looking at it a lot in this last week since you said it as well. And like for myself, and I know I'm trying to probably like think about it way too much and cognitize it rather than just being like, okay, so where is it that I am not willing to be in other people's worlds? And it's so true. I don't want to be, I'll almost force myself in when I need to, but the rest of the time I'm like, I'll just keep myself over here and do my own thing and not bother anyone or not be like an imposition on people or something like that. So can you talk about like what is that? How do you like infuse or insert or make yourself a part of other people's world like that?
You hit the nail on the head when you said impose, because that's what you actually really have to be willing to be. See, most people, I mean, you might think it's ridiculous, and some others will too, when I say that I'm actually quite an introverted person. I may be gregarious, and I may be willing to be heard and be seen, etc. But I historically and in general have not been, like, I'm quite happy to come home and be alone and hang out on my own for very long stretches of time. And that's okay with me. That's kind of how I have normally lived for quite a long time. But there's a place when you're not willing to put you in their world where you become the effect of everyone else's world. And what your reality is in your world, if you're willing to actually impose, you put it out there as something that has as much value as everyone else and their point of view and their opinions and their feelings, etc. Not that that's what you want to project. It's just your feelings and your thoughts and your emotions and your judgments. No, but you uniquely, just as me uniquely, have a point of view and a possibility available to us that if we're not willing to share with the world and actually impose it on people is a shame. And it is a diminishment of what's possible for all if we're not willing to just go, you know what? Here's what I know. Here's the possibility that I see that no one else may see. But you have to get over that thing of it being an imposition on anybody else or in anyone's world. Because, I mean, the thing with consciousness as well is the way we look at consciousness from the point of view with access consciousness is consciousness includes everything and judges nothing. So why would you not, A, include you, but also why would you not include imposing as an energy and a possibility? You shut that off as though being imposing is wrong. But I mean, sometimes you know something different or you know a possibility that no one else does, that if you're willing to open your mouth, put yourself out there and insert yourself into the world around you, you create a greater possibility for everybody.
That's awesome. And it's also where being that space of being willing to be whatever energy that is to put yourself into other people's world becomes an invitation, right? Like, because, you know, if we were to explore this simply from like a polar perspective where it's like, well, I'm now going to be an imposition and I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to, like, it becomes a little bit one-sided in my brain. But then when you really look at the energy of that, of being willing to completely like inject yourself in everything and be like so big and spread out and in whatever places you need to be in, it's where you then become an invitation for people to see that and choose it if that's something that they desire to choose as well. So also where it becomes that complete invitation for people to be able to choose something different.
Yes. And you have got to be willing to do this, not from being right and not from proving anything. Because my sneaking suspicion is where most of us decide we will never be in imposition is we're surrounded by people who shove their points of view in our face as though they're right and we're wrong and their way's the highway and the best way. And if we don't do it, we're idiots. And we go, hang on, I don't want to be like that. But if you're not trying to prove you're right and you're not trying to prove anything, then what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yep. And also looking at that from the perspective of being you and changing the world. So like we know Dr. Dane here, the co-creator of Access Consciousness, wrote a book, 10 years ago or more. And it was actually when you started talking about this at the JCF training and I was running and, that's when I tend to like process things a lot. And I've read and listened to the audios of that book a lot of times and gotten a certain amount of what being you changing the world is or what actual possibilities are available with that. And then I started looking at it from this place, like where if you're willing to also be that energy in the world of going wherever you're needed to go, being in other people's worlds, it's being you. And it's also that invitation where you can change the world or something. Like it's this place of like it is. Because I always saw being you as like, well, that's just me, like this almost insular thing. But being you actually is being like all of that, being in other people's worlds, being in other people's realities and being that invitation, again, for them to choose more if they desire to, but also just being that there as an invitation for whatever it can create as greater.
Absolutely. But like say you write a book like Being You or you do a podcast like you have here. If you're not willing to impose yourself in other people's worlds, how far can it really go? If you're actually going to broadcast that and put it out there and introduce people to something different and a new possibility, if you're not willing to be a part of people's worlds, how can anything you create be a part of their world?
Yeah.
When Dane here wrote that book, Being You, Changing the World, that was an imposition in people's worlds.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
So it's like, go for it. I look at consciousness this way. We have a body. Each of us have a body, right? But then we have a being. And if my being is infinite and your being is infinite, how much do we overlap?
Yeah, a lot.
Infinitely. And not just you and I, but everyone and everything. And any place where you choose to separate or withdraw you and your being, it's actually a diminishment of the rich, dynamic fabric of beingness for all, if you want to get like really heady and esoteric about it.
Well, I love that. Yeah. And it's also like a lot of the time lately, we've been doing like Simone Millicis does this a lot. She just released an audio to a lot of the staff in Access and the certified facilitators. And if you guys are listening, I mean, this is probably going to be the 14th or 15th episode in my podcast. So, but if you've stumbled across this, it's your first time, you're kind of like, what the fuck are these people talking about? We both very much sort of immersed in and use the tools of Access Consciousness. So you can head to accessconsciousness.com or obviously, reach out to myself or Chris as well. But a lot of the time lately, I know a lot of us have been playing with this energetic exercise, which is what you were just talking about really has been where I've really started to explore my energetic being, not my body necessarily, but the being and the size of my being and what my being is capable of. And having that place where you start to play with like putting your being out and being aware of everything in the world, and then going even further and being aware of everything in the solar system, like where we can really start to play with consciousness and energy from a place of there not being any limitation, and where that gives you such a space with other people, because that's where because I'm cool when I'm by myself, like what we've been talking about, but then I get around other people and I'm like, that's when shit gets all weird and wonky. But to also have these tools and know about consciousness, including everything and judging nothing, and our energetic being infinitely big, like it starts to create this space of such ease with other people as well, because, well, I don't know why the because is, but it just does.
Yeah, well, the more allowance you're willing to have for you, the more allowance, it's so much easier to have even more allowance for other people.
Yeah.
You know,
and
the only reason why anybody bothers you or any of those group dynamics get weird, it's because someone's being something that you have an issue with, and usually it's an issue you have with yourself. Why do our mothers bother us so much? Well, without getting too Freudian, usually they represent part of us that we're like not that cool with.
Wow.
And sometimes they're just idiots, but
I've been talking a lot about this as well. I was going to ask you another question, but that's like an interesting turn too, because, you know, there's so many tools in Access. And at the moment I'm doing a book club for the Relationship Are You Sure You Want One book. And also being in this forced kind of isolation, it's really, really, really started, well, not started, but sort of been the catalyst for me to look at my relationship and my communion with myself. And these places are really coming up, where the places where you have that issue, quote unquote, with other people, and what that really is with you, like where those stuck points are actually things that possibly you're not totally cool with in your own life and world, which
Absolutely.
is really cool.
And those areas where you're not cool with, those are my favorite, because when you actually have a look at those and go, oh, I hate that bit about me, those are the places where you're not allowing that communion of consciousness of being included in everything. Those are your excuses for separation most of the time. So I always take them, and here's a little tip and tool for everybody out there. There's a thing we do in Access Consciousness where we ask a question and that brings up an energy, and then you clear it using the clearing statement. And there's a cool website called theclearingstatement.com, I think. And Dane here describes the clearing statement brilliantly. But you ask a question, you don't have to come up with an answer, and then you clear it. So I look at those judgments I have of me, right? And I go, what energy, space, and consciousness can I be to be that with total ease? So say your judgment of yourself is your body. And like in my life, I struggled a lot with having allowance for my body and the weight that it chooses to be. So I would go, okay, what energy, space, and consciousness can I be to be as obese, overweight, corpulent, and fat as I truly be for all eternity? And if you're willing to be it, it no longer can impact you anymore.
Yeah.
So for all of you out there who are struggling with being isolated and being alone and being separate, I would take this tool and play with it. Run for yourself. What energy, space, and consciousness can I be to be as isolated, alone, and separate as I truly be for all eternity? And everything that is times a Godzillion will you destroy and uncreate it all. Right and wrong, good and bad, pot and pock, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds.
Oh, that's cool. Because really, like, and when we run those clearings as well, because most people, like in this reality, we're taught to fix things or to look at what's wrong with us and change it. Whereas what I love about Access is there's nowhere where we're like, oh, that's wrong, we need to change it. It's like, what if I totally indulged in it to get over the fact that the only thing that's fucking me over here is my judgment of it. It's not the actual thing itself, because there's nothing solid in this world except that which we make it so. So the judgment is really that thing that creates the shit, the solidity, the everything. Yeah.
And when we say that consciousness includes everything and judges nothing, we mean nothing, like nothing. If you know, whatever the wildest, most horrible thing you think is true about you is terrible and awful, the only thing terrible and awful of it is your judgment, not the actual thing itself.
Right.
And those are the things, as I say, that you're using as an excuse to maintain your separation, to not include you in the world around you.
That one still gets me. And it's starting to like peel away a little bit now, but really go.
Well, the thing, okay, but wait a minute. So when you said that one still gets you, the thing that really hit home for me was what people don't realize is including you in the world around you doesn't mean being the loudest person in the room.
No, yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to be the life of the party. It means that you have gotten zero point of view. Like I went for lunch once with your brother, Brendan Watt, for those who know him, and Simone Millistis and Gary Douglas and Dane here and myself. And between myself and Simone and Dane and Gary, all of us have quite a lot to say. None of us are necessarily all that shy and retiring. And your brother can be quite... He's not like the most verbose person or very loud. He was quite quiet, but he was, I noticed having lunch with him that he was totally present and there for the entirety of the conversation. And he was a contribution to it with his presence, but he actually wasn't saying much.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask people to have a look at what have you defined as being present and including you that is not actually true.
Yep.
And everything. That is times a godzillion will you destroy and uncreate it all.
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pot and pock, all nine shorts, boys and beyond. A lot of people think if their mouth isn't open, then they're not a part of the conversation, but that's not actually true. And
also building on that too, like what you've misidentified and misapplied as how to connect with people and yourself too. Like how much we think speaking to people is how we connect with them. Like, where in actual fact, it's probably more where we will create a separation with the person, because so many people have a conversation to try and find the places that they match the judgments or, opinions, points of view or whatever it is of the other person, rather than it actually being a conversation about true communion, true connection and all that sort of stuff. It's really more like where we ping off each other to find that point that we can think we're connecting with them, but actually we're just finding a place to separate.
Absolutely. Or looking for a place where people can actually agree with us on something. But the kicker is that place where you're looking for agreement is actually cementing in the separation.
Yeah, that's where you've already separated, right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But you think that you've created this semblance of closeness and connection that are not the same thing as communion and as being actually without a barrier and without a point of view.
Yep.
I mean,
wow.
What is conversation without a point of view? An extrapolation of ideas. And sometimes not that much to say.
Yeah, which is also fun.
Yeah.
So just like swinging it back around a little bit, and where we started with talking about sort of this place of being willing to infuse ourselves, impose ourselves, or whatever that is into other people's worlds and realities. Do you have any, like, when you had that conversation with Gary and you started looking at this, were there things like that you can remember, or ways now that you could give like an example of how you do that in a way, I guess?
Yeah, sure. I was always looking at how everyone else's point of view was more valid or more important than my own.
Yep.
And I basically just stopped doing that. And again, not to be right and make my point of view better or more important than anybody else's. But I used to always start a conversation by saying, well, it's just my point of view, or, well, it may be not correct, or it may be not related, but, and then I would enter my opinion or awareness or whatever it was. And I just went, why am I constantly apologizing for myself?
Yeah.
I mean, if consciousness judges nothing and includes everything, even if you were just talking shit and you ended up being wrong, wouldn't that be included as well?
Yeah.
So the thing is, you just have to let it all hang out to the extent where you relax into being you. Like, I see with this self-isolation that a lot of us are in, there's this almost neurotic need to prove that you're doing something and that you're going to emerge a better person than you are now, rather than going, hang on a minute, the earth is getting a chance to breathe.
Yeah.
What if right now we weren't required to prove we were valuable and prove that this time was productive, and just enjoyed the hell out of ourselves?
Yeah.
By being.
Yeah.
And whatever you got up and chose to do that day wasn't wrong. It just was what you were choosing that day.
Yeah.
This morning, I got up and I watched Barbarella with Jane Fonda from 1968, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. And then I started drinking gin at an hour that most people would think was inappropriate. And then I did a little bit of work, and then I, just enough with the constant neurotic self-judgment about what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Go have some fun.
Yeah.
And if you offend people, generally speaking, it ain't yours. Unless you are a mean-ass bitch and that's what you want to do, is offend people. And if that's true, enjoy that too.
And what if we could truly take this into the future too? Like, we do hear everyone saying like, oh, when it goes back to normal or when all of this blows over. But what if like what we have available now as how we can create our lives and having this much space, what if this was always a possibility now and always available to us? And well, in actual fact that it always was, but now we're in a place where it's almost forced upon us in a way. It's like...
And that's what people are resisting to, probably. I mean, I was looking at for myself and my usual habits. I don't go out with people. I was laughing the other day because I was polishing my silver. I collect a lot of silver, and I've got a beautiful dining room. And I could easily seat probably 18 people for dinner. And I realized I would hate having 18 people over for dinner. And
but you like the table setting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's a time I would have made myself wrong for that. But now I just go, oh, isn't this delightful that I don't have to have anyone over?
Yeah. So what if that was like, because Brendan said something about this, I don't know, at some point recently as well. Like, what if this time we could really use to get to know our true selves? Like, what parts of us have we just piled doing and needing to do things and be here and go there? Like, it's almost like we pile that on top of us who cares for why? But now, like, what if now is really the time where we got brutally honest with ourselves? Like for you, I love having, a place to seat 18 people because it looks beautiful, but I don't ever want to have 18 people to my house for dinner. Like, what if that was part of who you were? And yeah, like that question of like, truly, who am I?
And not from a definition, but who am I today? And am I having fun with that?
Yep. Love it.
Because every day you can choose something different, be something different, explore a different part of you as an infinite being. There's no choice unavailable to you.
Right.
So,
and just because you've done it
spice one day, and you might be posh spice the next.
Potatoes the next.
Exactly.
And just because it was fun yesterday and got you XYZ result or whatever that was that it created doesn't mean that it's going to create the same thing or you have to do it again today. Like, what if you could choose something different and it be just as fun or more?
But then you would have to give up the judgment of you that you are inconsistent.
Ooh, and you would have to give up having an expectation of yourself, especially when it came to things like, ways of creating your body. I did this yesterday and it got this result, so I'm going to do it again today and keep getting this ongoing change or whatever.
Well, but therein is the thing too. What if nothing you did was aiming towards a result.
I love that.
And what if the value of you had nothing to do with the result you create in the world?
The value of you. I love that.
Yeah. From my point of view, we're all integral parts of consciousness and oneness. And whatever we do and the result that we create, if you try and quantify that based on a judgment, you are automatically separating yourself from the oneness that you are.
Yep. And it's basically just really undone everything that created in the world, because you've solidified it into a place where it's become something that, needs to be quantified or whatever. Oh, my Lord, we could just go on about this all day, my friend, but...
Forever and ever and ever, amen.
Forever. What I want to know now is if people have heard this and they're like, oh, my God, I need more of this man. He is brilliant, which we know that you are. Where can they find you? What are you up to these days, being in isolation?
I have a monthly call that I do for people called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is on my Kajabi site, which I don't 100% remember the address of my Kajabi site. But if you go to my website, mrchristopherhughes.com.au, you can find me there, and that links to my Kajabi site. And I also have classes coming up of all sorts. Next week, I'm not sure when this is airing, actually, sorry, Sarah, but on the 15th and 16th of April, we've rescheduled a call that I'm doing with Dr. David Kubas called Why You Don't Have a Man, which is
I'll be on
a bit of fun. Babe. And then I'm also doing a 3-day class. Well, it's actually turning into a 4-day class on Right Voice for You, something I facilitate on the 17th of April, Australian time, until the 20th. It's 4 hours a day for 4 days.
Wonderful.
So I got lots going on. And also, if you check out accessconsciousness.com/Christopher Hughes, you can find a lot of the stuff I'm doing there as well.
Wonderful. And we'll pop all of those links in the show notes as well, so people can easily go and click on things and find out more about where you are in the world. So how does it get any easier than that? Thank you so much, my friend. You are brilliant. And I want to mention one more thing. If you're interested in beautiful things, Chris also is the managing director, owner, creator of the Antique Guild in Brisbane. And they have a beautiful online website, and you're also creating some online shopping experiences for people as well. So if you guys want to know more about beautiful things and possibly to spend some money and buy yourself some beautiful things, you can go to theantiqueguild.com.au.
That's it. And there's a jewelry show coming up on April 22nd, which will be on Zoom, that you can join us for 2 hours, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to be showcasing some beautiful pieces, but also teaching you a bit about them and why they have the value that they do, so that if you choose to buy, that's great. But also my aim is for you to walk away with more information, so that in the future, you are more informed with the purchases that you make on adding things of beauty and value to your life.
And for me, even just listening to you speak about it, even if I never use that information again, it enriches my whole life. So even just come on and listen to Chris talk about beautiful things, and the way he speaks about it is, beyond this world. So thank you so much for joining us. You are wonderful. And thank you for listening, everyone. We'll be back with another episode next week. And whatever you're choosing, I hope you're just having ridiculous amounts of fun.
Yay. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Consciousness Road Trip podcast. If you'd like to find more of my podcast or more information, you can head to my website, sarahwatt.com.au/road trip or sarahwatt.podbean.com. See you on the next episode.